Good morning. The time is 9:30 a.m. and I will call this meeting to order. This is the regularly scheduled business meeting of the Montana Public Service Commission. The time is 9:30 a.m. The date is Tuesday, January 14th, 2025. The commission and its staff are appearing from Helena, Montana in the Bollinger Room of the Montana Public Service Commission offices. I am Vice President Jennifer Fielder, and I am your presiding chairman for this meeting. Commissioner Molnar, a point of personal privilege on the chairmanship assignments.
If I might, thank you, Vice President. This was originally, we had scheduled in that Commissioner Pinocci would be chairing this. His district is the largest impacted by any decisions we might make, particularly on the MDU case today. Unfortunately, he can't be here in person, so that's not possible, but he will be here electronically, is my understanding. So his constituents should know that he is heavily engaged in this. He's well read up on this, and he will be following it through, not just past this interim, but all the way through to the final ruling. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. All right. Would you all please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Okay, for the record, we do have present in this meeting Commissioner Bukacek, President Molnar, Vice President Fielder, Commissioner Wellborn, and Commissioner Randall Pinocci is attending online. So we do have a quorum present. And at this time, we will go to announcements. Commissioner President Molnar.
Thank you, Vice President Fielder. I would like to announce that so far as the agency coordinating team goes, Vice President Fielder will be the chair of that. So far as the strategic planning project leader goes, which is very, very important, Vice President Fielder will be chairing that. The communications team, there's about 10 names of people that are considered to be on that. I'm going to appoint Trevor Graff in order of ascendancy, Lucas Hamilton and Tina Shorten. The others should not think they are off of the communications team. Each of them, within their various levels of expertise, will be called on by any one of these and shall act officially.
Thank you, Mr. President. And we'll give that list to the secretary so she can record the appointments in the minutes. All right, thank you. All right. We will now move to public comment. The Public Service Commission welcomes any comment on any item that is on today's agenda or any matter that is within the jurisdiction of the Montana Public Service Commission. First, are there any public commenters in the room? Are there any public commenters in the room? Seeing none. Are there any public commenters online? I'm told we have 4. We have 5. Okay. Commenter number 1. I don't have a name filled in here. Here we go. Bruce Peterson. Are you available, Bruce?
Yes.
Okay. Please state and spell your name for the record and go ahead and give your comment.
Bruce Peterson, BRUCEPETERSON. I am a retired teacher in Glendive, Montana. My wife is a retired teacher also, so we're both living on a fixed income. So this rate hike is going to impact us as well as a lot of businesses in town here. So I do have a few questions I appreciate, first of all, thank you for hearing my comments. I have a few questions I guess I'd like you to look at, consider before making your decision on this rate hike. I'll leave it at 4 questions. So first of all, I guess, what has changed since the last vote on this interim rate increase? This has MDU proven their need for this increase? Second question, why is this interim increase such a large proportion of the full increase? It looks like about 85% of the full increase. That's a pretty good jump for an interim rate, I would think. Thirdly, MDU stock has increased over 40% in the last year. If business is so good, why do they need another large rate increase? And finally, fourth question, is MDU making record profits? So I'd like you to consider those in your decision making. I appreciate you hearing my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Next commenter, Mary Catherine Dunphy.
Hello, can you hear me?
Okay, are you available?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Yes, my name is Mary Catherine Dunphy. I live in Miles City, Montana. I'm 73 years old, and I'm here today to speak on the MDU proposed interim rate increase. As I understand it, there are 78,000 natural gas residential ratepayers for MDU in Montana, many of whom are senior citizens on fixed incomes and low-income working class families. Miles City, where I live, has a poverty rate of 14%. For comparisons purposes, I'd like to speak about MDU, which is a $6.06 billion company. MDU Resources last year paid 52 cents per share in the last year. There are 452 institutional investors, and the 3 largest are Vanguard Group, BlackRock, and Corvex Management. Vanguard has 19.72 million shares, and so when MDU paid 52 per share, they got 10.25 million. BlackRock has 18.5 million shares, and at 52 cents per share last year, they got 9.64 million. And Corvex Management owns 10.15 million shares, and at 52 cents a share, they got 5.27 million. And these 3 institutional investors own less than a quarter of the shares of MDU. So when Montana's 78,000 natural gas ratepayers who are, captive ratepayers pay their bills, they are, supporting these institutions, financial institutions. And as I understand it, MDU is claiming that if they don't get this interim rate increase, they won't be able to do scheduled maintenance. However, in the last year, they have paid out roughly 25 million to their 3 largest institutional shareholders. According to the Consumer Council, in their rate increase request, MDU has included short-term incentive compensation, executive incentive compensation, board of director related expenses, and investor relation expenses, all in their requirements. So this is not about doing badly needed maintenance. They have access to the capital. This is, big executive compensations. As I understand it, nothing has changed since the PSC has voted on this interim rate increase last October, except that the shareholders got their dividends and ratepayers got their winter heating bills. MDU should have to justify the full increase, especially since the increase makes up 85% of the requested increase without a comprehensive look at the facts. This, I keep wondering why they get such a high return on equity. I'd like to address a question specifically to Commissioner Wellborn. I know that you own a trailer dealership. You face competition, lots of competitions, and you have real expenses that you just can't pass through to your customers. Why should MDU, who passes through their largest cost, the fuel cost, to its customers and faces no competition, get such a high return on equity? This is not the free market. No small business in Miles City gets a guaranteed return on equity. It seems that captive ratepayers, or MDU's captive ratepayers in Eastern Montana, are working for MDU's executives and investors. And with every rate increase as the years go by, Montana ratepayers lose financial ground because, like me, many are senior citizens or low-income working class families. So I would urge you to deny the interim rate increase until you have fully investigated what this rate increase is all about. And I thank you for listening to my comment today, and wish you all well. Thank you.
Thank you. Next public commenter is Rick Crone. Mr. Crone, are you available? If you are speaking, we can't hear you. You are appearing to be unmuted, but we are not hearing anything. Sorry, Mr. Crone, we cannot hear you at this time. You might check its technology on your end and see if your microphone is connected. And in the meanwhile, we will move on to the next public commenter. And Mr. Crone, if you can hear us, we will come back to you. Next public commenter is Jeff Pattison.
Hello, thank you for taking my comment here today. I appreciate the time that you guys spend and everything else. So my name is Jeff Pattison. That's Pattison. I'm from over by Hinsdale, Montana. So a couple of comments and then a question or two maybe that you guys could ask of MDU. So while I fully appreciate the mitzvah to come and ask for a rate increase when record profits are being held by a utility company, in light of the economic impact or landscape of the people that are asking the rate increase to. As the second caller called in, the lady so eloquently spoke. Malaise here in Eastern Montana and some of the concerns that we have. I just don't see that happening there. And I would encourage you as commissioners to really study the economic landscape of the areas that these utility companies are asking an increase for. Now, that being said, I'm not so blind where I can't see that there are needs out there and that not every request should be denied, but this one certainly I'm kind of wondering about again. And my question to you as commissioners that maybe you could ask on my behalf was in 2021, I believe it was in March, we had a natural gas melee in Hinsdale. And we shut down the school in the town and everybody was kind of running around trying to get that. Our county commissioner, John Falgren, said he spoke with MDU officials and that this thing would all be rectified. It was an emergency pipeline put in to get something happen in the interim, and then they were going to they put in I presume a permanent upgraded, whatever it is on it. Did that get done? And if so, what is the rate increase going to go for on that? I would like to know, and maybe you guys could ask that, exactly how they're going to count for the money that's going to whatever
I think I just got,
that they think is an emergency deal. Vanguard, BlackRock are two of the biggest
I had it on the wrong side.
financial institutions in the world. They own like 80% of the world. There is so much money there anyhow. I just don't see it in the farming, ranching community. We are
Thanks,
really struggling
Oh,
even now with very little snowpack. I mean, the water situation is looking kind of tight with St. Mary's and the Milk River situation coming down the pike here. There might not even be any water to irrigate. So I don't know how many guys are going to turn the power on or run natural gas to do anything here. But I'm not trying to paint a bad picture. I'm just telling you this is reality of it. So for all those of us in Eastern Montana, we're really behind the gun financially as far as profits or even trying to get a profit. I mean, a 30% profit would be like, wow, I'd settle right now for a 3%. Be honest with you. So I would really have a hard time recommending voting for this rate increase without knowing a lot more about it. But as it stands right now, I think it would be a foolish decision on your parts, and I probably defer a little bit to Commissioner Pinocci. That's his district anyhow, what he would probably go on it. And if I may, as a personal privilege, maybe if you could take that, Commissioner Wellborn, Scott Sales told me to tell you hi. So there you have it. Thank you very much for your time and allowing me to comment. I'll listen with interest, and hopefully things will work out for the best for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. And we will now return to Rick Crone, who I believe may have access now. Mr. Crone?
I hope so. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Good. Okay. So basically, most of what I was going to say has already been said and said very well, but I want to just come back to one thing, the 16.4% increase for residential customers. I think about this, obviously, we all think about it from our own perspective. I'm like many of the callers, I'm retired. I'm on a fixed income, living in Miles City. I can't imagine, not getting upset if, say, the price of gas went up gas for our cars, went up 16.4%, or price of apples. We just literally settled an election because of the price of eggs. So I would hope that this commission would look at that, and maybe it's good policy going forward to maybe cap these increases, or require these utilities to cap their rate increase requests at the rate of inflation and no more. And that's even maybe a little too high. But I think you have to have some kind of control on this. I've been back in Miles City for 2 years, and this is the third time that we've had to deal with requests for rate increases from Montana Dakota Utilities. So, and the other thing you might consider is only allowing a rate increase request once every 24 months. That seems pretty fair to me. With that said, I'll just close my comments at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we will go to Matthew Clausen.
Yeah, my name is Matthew Clausen. I'm from Billings, Montana. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I would like to express my concern with the rate increase MDU is trying to burden their customers with. This request was denied just a month ago. As a small business owner, if I increase my rates by 16.4%, my clients would turn to other businesses for similar services. As an MDU customer, I do not have that option. I am stuck with the rates they choose to charge me. To finish, I do not think Montana families should have to be burdened with an unjustified rate increase. Thank you for your time, and that is all I got to say.
Thank you. Are there any other public commenters online? See no other public commenters online or in the room. We will now move on to action items. And that would, first action item is approval of commission minutes. Do I hear a motion? Commissioner Wellborn,
I so move.
is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Wellborn has moved adoption of the commission minutes for the week of January 6, 2025. Motion has been seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Say no. The motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Okay, we will now move into work sessions. The first session on the docket or on the agenda here is 2024.01.011. Commission initiated Northwestern Energy's petition to amend Montana Administrative Rule 35.5.1909 and to consider amending the same rule. Mr. Polko.
Chair Fielder, Commissioners, before you today is a notice of adoption concerning amendments to Montana Administrative Rule 38.5.1909, which pertains to the creation of a legally enforceable obligation under the Public Utilities Regulatory Policy Act, otherwise known as PURPA. Generally, the purpose of this rulemaking was to update Montana Administrative Rule 38.5.1909 to create standards for how an existing qualifying facility, which is otherwise referred to as a QF, that has achieved commercial operation creates a legally enforceable obligation. Just for some background in this docket, this initially began as a petition to initiate rulemaking by Northwestern Energy. After initial notice of Northwestern's petition, the commission received comments from interested parties and held a roundtable in this matter. In July 2024, the commission issued a notice of public hearing on proposed amendment, and the commission held a hearing on the proposed amendments on September 11th, 2024. The notice of adoption that you are considering today makes minor edits to the proposed amendments that were noticed in July of 2024. The only changes are the addition of the word signed before written statement in each part of the rule. Staff recommends that the commission approve the draft notice of adoption and authorize staff to make any non-substantive changes required for the publication in the Montana Administrative Register. I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Polko. Are there any questions for Mr. Polko from commissioners? Hearing none, do we have a motion? Commissioner Bukacek?
I make a motion to approve the draft notice of adoption and authorize staff to make any non-substantive changes required for publication in the Montana Administrative Register.
Is there a second? I will second the motion. Okay, any discussion on the motion? I would just say that it's a very simple change and makes sense to require written statements to be signed. So thank you for thank you for bringing this to us. I would just note, oh, no, that's a different one. There's no further discussion. We'll take a vote.
Madam Chairman.
Mr. Commissioner Panochi.
Okay. First off, I want to let everybody know I had surgery late last week and I'm not allowed to drive yet. So I apologize for not being there in person. I have a question for Dan Polko, one or two.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Today, are we voting on the rate increase so that the listeners understand what we're voting on today?
Yes, Commissioner Panochi, the Montana Dakota's utility rate adjustment is work session item 2, and we will be moving to that shortly after we conclude this work session on the rule change for Northwestern Energy's petition regarding docket 38.5.1901, which is a commission rule change.
Yeah, so to be clear, we're not voting on the rate increase on this vote. I just want the listeners to understand that.
That's correct. We will be moving to that. We would encourage listeners to stay with us and hear the conversation.
Thank you. Just wanted to make that clear.
Okay. Are there any other questions, comments from commissioners before we take a vote on this amended rule? Hearing none, all in favor of amending rule 38.5.263 is presented to the commission, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Okay, and now we will move to work session number 2, and this is the MDU application for authority to establish increased rates for natural gas service and a request for interim revenue rate increase, and to consider issuing an interim order granting in part MDU's requested interim revenue rate increase. And I believe the lead staff on this one, is that Mr. Fink today?
Good morning, Vice President Fielder. This is Grant Fink, rate analyst here at the Public Service Commission. I'll be leading this off here.
All right, Grant, your team is assembled at the table, so go ahead.
Thank you. As you had just mentioned, this is in docket 2024.05.061. Montana, Dakota filed an application to establish increased rates for its natural gas service on July 15th, 2024. In its application, Montana, Dakota filed a request to increase its rates on an interim basis. This matter was previously brought before the Commission during the October 15th, 2024 business meeting. No decision on the interim rate application was made at that meeting. In light of having 2 new commissioners here with us today, staff will present the information that was presented during that business meeting, along with some supplemental information. You should have in your reading materials detailed information regarding MDU's interim rate request, as well as staff's recommendation. In a nutshell, staff recommends an interim rate increase be granted, but in a lesser amount than that proposed by MDU. If the Commission approves staff's recommendation, this will increase the bill of an average residential customer using 65 therms by $5.01 per month, or 10.25%. There are 3 primary drivers contributing to MDU's requested rate increase. First one being operation and maintenance expenses. These are operational costs the utility incurs to provide safe and reliable service to its customers. Major expenses include labor, vehicles and work equipment, software maintenance, and subcontract labor. Second primary driver is the return on its investment. MDU is allowed an opportunity to earn a return on its investments that are placed into rate base. Rate base is generally the value of facilities and other investments used to provide service to customers. You'll recall seeing from the staff memo and draft order that rate base has increased approximately $43 million since MDU's last rate case, which utilized a 2020 known and measurable change period. Provided in testimony, MDU asserted that the company made significant capital expenditures for new plant investment in its mains and services. These were attributed to its safety system integrity projects. Montana Dakota Utility System Safety and Integrity Program is a pipeline replacement program that accounts for a substantial portion of the company's natural gas distribution capital investment. The replacements are a direct result of the integrity management program mandated by the Federal Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration. Pipeline replacement is typically the most viable option to remediate risk associated with corrosion, material, weld and joint, and equipment failure. If MDU determines that replacement is an appropriate action to reduce the risk, the company establishes a replacement project. Ratepayers benefit from the pipeline replacements because these projects eliminate early vintage steel and plastic pipelines prone to bare or poor coating, and address industry documented ADIL-A plastic defects. Replacement of these high-risk systems ultimately increases overall public safety, lowers operating and maintenance expense costs, and improves system reliability for Montana Dakota's customers. Capital projects for which MDU seeks recovery in this rate case include the Glendive project, which was a multi-year project focusing on the replacement of low-pressure natural gas mains and services with medium and high-density polyethylene lines. It contained approximately 33 miles of mains, and the project was completed in 2019, and it started in 2019. Another project was the Hinsdale project, which was an unplanned emergency project to the majority of distribution system due to extensive corrosion and active leaks on steel, gas, mains, and service lines. This was a 2-mile replacement project that was completed in 2021. Another project was was based out in Miles City, and this project focused on replacing low pressure natural gas mains and services with medium and high density polyethylene lines as well. Miles City was identified as MDU's highest risk on its natural gas system in the state of Montana in 2021. The project was started in 2022 and is expected to be completed in 2026. The third primary driver of this rate case is depreciation expense. Remember, a utility is entitled to recover its investment over a period of time or an amortization period. With the increase in rate base, depreciation expense also increased. Next, I wanted to provide some background with interim request and a general rate case. During the rate case procedure, there is testimony, discovery, briefing, as well as a hearing. It's typically a 270-day process or approximately 9 months. Staff has a vigorous process and an abundance of information to make an informed decision. Interims are different. Generally, intervening parties don't comment on the interim request. Staff can, however, look at the statutes and rules to make an informed decision. Both the statutes and rules were included in the memo and draft interim order. Generally speaking, Montana law and commission rules regarding interim increases provide the commission broad discretion to determine interim rate adjustments. First, Montana Code annotated 69-3-304 states the commission may, in its discretion, temporarily approve increases or decreases pending a hearing or final decision. And an order of the commission approving or denying a temporary rate increase or decrease shall be based upon consistent standards appropriate for the nature of the case pending. Additionally, is Administrative Rule 38.5.506, Subpart 1 states consideration of an application to increase rates on an interim basis in a general rate case increase proceeding will be guided by generally established principles of utility rate regulation. Now, in the regulatory world, there's a term called regulatory contract. This is part of the generally established principles of utility rate regulation. It's recognized throughout the United States as a fair statement of the obligations of commissions and utilities when it comes to rate of return regulation. In general, the regulated company is allowed the opportunity to earn a fair return on its investment and is protected from competition. And in return, the company is required to provide service to all who need it, and the services be of good quality, safe, and reasonably priced. In looking at the interim request, one of the things staff does is look to see if the utility is earning a fair return. The return staff measures is the return to shareholders, or also known as the return on equity. The Hope and Bluefield Seminole Supreme Court decisions of generally established principles of rate regulation strongly guide this commission's return on equity decisions. These two cases set 3 basic standards for appropriate return on equities. Those being, the return on equity should be commensurate with businesses of similar risk. The return on equity should be sufficient to maintain financial integrity of the company. And then lastly, the return on equity should be adequate such the utility can attract investors and capital on reasonable terms. When looking at MDU's financials, their 2022 and 2023 reported rate of returns were 5.20% and 2.29% respectively. Those figures are well below the lowest rate of return in the evidentiary record from MDU's last rate case, which was 6.63%. Additionally, the 2023 test year pro forma financial results in the interim application indicate a rate of return of 2.43% and a return on equity of 0.18%. Those results indicate that MDU's current rates barely recover the cost of providing natural gas service and do not allow MDU's shareholders to earn a reasonable return on their investment. For reference, the last commission approved return on equity for MDU's natural gas service was 9.4%, which was approved in their 2017 rate case. Staff believes approving MDU's interim application in part would be reasonable. Staff believes reducing the annual depreciation expense to reflect the depreciation rates proposed in the overall application. This would reduce MDU's proposed interim request by $248,539. In addition, staff also recommends reducing the interim revenue requirement further by $1,100 to reflect a minor expense error found in discovery. Based on those two adjustments, staff recommends approving an interim revenue increase of $7,734,746. As previously mentioned, if approved, the adjusted interim revenue requirement would increase the bill of an average residential customer using 65 therms by $5.01 per month, or 10.25%. As a reminder, customers' interim rates are refundable with interest if the commission ultimately approves permanent rates that are lower than the interim rate. Staff would like to reiterate that MDU's current return on equity does not meet established regulatory principles set by Hope and Bluefield. If the commission, with that, commissioners, if the commission chooses to adopt the proposed final order as its final order, the effective date for the rates in the order be changed to February 1. This is in paragraph 32. And the tariffs will need to be submitted to the commission by January 29th, 2025. This is in paragraph 34. And with that, I will thank you. And with me today is Neil Templeton, Laura Vahowski, Timothy Nerstad, and Dan Polkow.
Thank you, Mr. Fink. Do any of the other staff members have anything to add or clarify at this time? Mr. Templeton.
Good morning, Vice President Fielder, President Molnar, and other members of the commission. I just wanted to say, from a cost allocation and rate design perspective, MDU has submitted a standard filing, which is a equal percentage increase to all customers. So they recommended 29% increase on the basic service charge and the distribution delivery charges or demand charges, and staff's corrections to that or modifications. Staff is recommending about a percentage point lower, so that would be a 27% increase to the distribution charges and the cost of the monthly service charge. And of course, cost of gas is not included in this filing, so the actual bill increase is a little bit different than that. We're just looking at the distribution rates and the monthly service rate. And I would like to clarify, I'm not sure, was that the rate of return on equity in the interim filing, I believe, is based on the last commission approved final approval of return on equity. So it's not the one that they're proposing in this case. So the one that they're proposing in this case is a little bit higher than, I believe, Grant quoted 9.4%. So, and of course, if the commission finds any adjustment that would decrease the final rates from the ones that are included in the interim, then all that money would be refunded with interest, as Grant has made clear. Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification. Any other clarifications or comments from staff? Before we open up a motion on this, are there any questions from commissioners of staff? President Molnar.
Thank you. Mr. Wolf?
Nerstad.
I'm sorry. Yesterday, I asked you to check into, and I know that might not be enough time for this, but to check to see in the other jurisdictions, Wyoming, South Dakota, North Dakota, if the rate of return was about the same and if the rates were about the same. Have you had a chance to look at that?
I did not have a chance to collect the earned returns by MDU Gas in the other jurisdictions in which they operate. They do operate in natural gas services across 8 states. They have different authorized returns in those states, as well as different earned returns, just based on the individual circumstances in each state. I can get those for you, although I would caution that it's not, that information is not part of the record in this docket.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll comment on that. This is an interim, and there will be a lot more facts to be found and checked. He is correct. The things that were listed, the build outs of natural gas, the checking, various things that have gone on in the last 4 years might not take place in the other jurisdictions. Return on equity might be different because of that. The cost might be different than that. But I would like to, and I will continue to look at things like that to make sure that things like, is it a management problem? Is it just a simple matter of market and then we have to resolve that? This case is not going to close on this. There will be a lot more investigation by myself. I know Commissioner Panucci has questions and other commissioners as well. But that's one of the things that I'm looking at is a comparison. If it comes out that there's some large differences, why are they? And we'll go from that. If we have to open it up to that, I'll do so. Thank you.
Thank you, President Molnar. Are there any other questions of staff from commissioners at this time? Commissioner Bukacek.
No questions. I just wanted to make some comments and thank staff for their diligence in this case. And you presented us, I'm really well versed in this case. You presented us with high quality work and very clear and concise language, 5 pages of memorandum, 10 pages of an interim order. And I appreciate greatly the explanations of your thought processes and your references to appropriate Montana administrative rules, statutes, and Supreme Court precedent. You demonstrated a rigorous application of appropriate standards in interim rate cases, demonstrating that broad discretion granted to the commission in these cases includes strong language in statutes that our discretion shall be, which means are mandated to be, based on consistent standards of rate making. And last but not least, in thanking staff, I just wanted to say how much I appreciate having made yourselves available to us.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff at this time? I have a couple. So when was well, first of all, let's go back to the basics here. This rate increase that's being requested on an interim basis would result in an average of $5.01 per month for the average customer, residential customer, correct? I'll ask Mr. Fink since you're the lead on this.
Vice President Fielder, that is correct.
Okay. And Mr. Fink, can you tell us when the last rate increase was?
The last natural gas application filed by Montana Dakota Utilities was filed in 2020. So just kind of shooting a month out here, but I'm going to guess it was approved sometime in the summer or fall of 2020 or 2021. I'd have to check that, Vice President Fielder, to be exact.
All right. Well, we do know that the last request for an increase came through in 2020 as a docket to the commission, correct?
I believe that's correct. Yes.
And so what we have before us is since 2020, which was a little over 4 years ago, this increase would be about $5.01 per month for the average customer. above and beyond what they were paying at that last rate adjustment that was made by the commission in the 2020 docket. Is that correct?
Correct. The average customer's bill will increase by that $5.01.
And this is this average monthly increase can be calculated as about $5 a month, but it was 10.25% overall. We should.
That's correct. That's correct, Vice President Fielder.
Okay, so we're looking at about a 10 point, not about, as staff has presented it to us, a 10.5% increase. And that's not a sudden jump in a 1 year period. That's since the last rate case in 2020. Is that correct?
Vice President Fielder, from following that question correctly, this interim rate increase is the approximately the 10.25% for average residential customer.
That's a 10.25% increase since when?
It would be since their last, it would be since their last approved rates in their last rate case for each customer. However, I mean, they do have the natural gas tracker, which tracks gas costs. So there are fluctuations in price signals for that. But in regards to your base rates, this would be the last approved increase.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. So yes, there are fluctuations based on actual commodity prices that are built into the, I believe it's the PCAM. So one thing that I think, from hearing the public on this, at first glance in this case, I was a hard no also when I looked at the numbers. But when you factor these things in, and I wanted to be clear that this isn't a 10.25% annual increase. This is a 10.25% rate adjustment that are made. These rate adjustments are made periodically, several years apart. So the last rate adjustment was 2020 to 2021. Am I understanding that correctly, Mr. Fink?
I believe that's correct, Vice President, if I'm following you correctly.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any other questions for staff. Do any other commissioners have questions for staff at this time?
Madam Chairman.
Mr. Pinocci, Commissioner Pinocci.
Thank you. So I heard some testimony from staff where I heard 29% and then staff recommended 27%. Can staff explain that to me?
Mr. Templeton.
Yes, Vice President Fielder and Commissioner Pinocci. Actually, it was 27 and change, so I think it's closer to 28%. It's about a 1 percentage point decrease from the application or the request. And the reason is that's for the distribution charges and the monthly service charges. Monthly service charges are a fixed charge, and that's per customer. And then the distribution charges are volume based. So they're volumetric rates based on the amount of decatherms the customer purchases in a month. But the 28% increase only applies to those rates. It doesn't include the cost of gas, or property tax increases, that kind of thing. So that's why the total percent as quoted by Mr. Fink is lower than the 28% quoted that I relayed to you. Because it's just a section of the total bill. It's just
9% lower to 27%. So I wanted to make that clear.
Yes, because it's just a subsection of the total tariff.
Can I get some clarification on this too? So this 29% was for distribution, and that's for the replacement of the pipelines. Is that correct?
Yes, Vice President Fielder, the distribution delivery charge, they're requesting a total increase in the final request. they're requesting increases at, say, we'll look at residential rate 60, and they're requesting an increase in the monthly service charge and in the distribution delivery charge. And that's the increase that they're requesting is largely to recover the costs of their new investment in pipeline to meet PHMSA regulations and provide safe and reliable service to their customers.
And when all sectors of this rate case are averaged out or compiled, the net increase that's before the commission here is 10.25%. Is that correct?
The Vice President Fielder, I'll refer you to Grant because he made that calculation to Mr. Fink. But I believe that would be for a standard residential customer, and it doesn't reflect the rates on all customers. But I'll defer that to Mr. Fink.
Well, Mr. Fink answered that question for me. Commissioner Pinocci, let's go back to you. Please forgive me for interrupting. I wanted to get clear while you were on that point about the distribution expenses. So Commissioner Pinocci, additional questions?
Yes, thank you. And I'm sure we have a lot of listeners trying to follow along, so I'm glad we clarified that percentage. Let's talk about 2020. There was a rate increase that I did vote for and was approved by the commission. And MDU had explained and staff explained that they needed to do some upgrading in Hinsdale, in the Glasgow area, and in other areas, but I don't remember them mentioning Glendive. But Glasgow and Hinsdale was specifically mentioned. One of the questions I asked in 2020 was, how do I know that the money that we're going to approve will complete and be used for the upgrades due to an aging system? And staff assured me that that's what the money had to be used for. Then I believe the question was asked, is this going to finish the upgrading? And I believe the answer was yes. So we approved that. Days later, there were leaks that surfaced in Hinsdale, and the whole system was shut down. And there was an article that was done that said, hey, it was really good that the Public Service Commission approved the money for those upgrades just in time, and leaks were detected after we approved it. The article was March of 2021. So I do believe that the timing that we may have voted on was 2020 or early 2021. And I looked at the article today. But a question that is certainly going to be asked is, if we gave them the money to do the upgrades, why are we still talking about the need for more money to do upgrades in the Glasgow and Hinsdale area? Staff, do you have any answer for that?
Vice President Fielder, Commissioner Pinocci, I can't speak to the article or why there was a leak after why the project was completed. We staff could look into that further for you as we continue to through the process in this rate case.
Madam Chair, let me follow up. I think the question is, we approve money to do upgrades. Were the upgrades completed? And if not, why not? And it looks like we're asking for money to upgrade in Glasgow and Hinsdale after money was already asked and given to do those upgrades. What's the answer to that question?
Vice President Fielder, Commissioner Pinocci, to expand on my answer, it appears in this record, the evidence that we have so far, it was about 2 miles of project that was completed with the pipes that were replaced, and there may have been additional piping that resulted in the article that you had seen in the paper. With that, we can continue to review and look into your question as this rate case continues.
Madam Chair, follow up.
Follow up.
So the consumer telling me, Commissioner Pinocci, here's our concerns. Wouldn't the responsibility of doing upgrades be part of the base that they have now? And then the concern is, if a utility simply wanted to have a higher profit. They just simply would ask for money to do upgrades in the concern of safety. How do we know that? How do we explain to the ratepayer what their responsibility to upgrade the system is without coming to the ratepayer asking for money each time they say there's a safety concern? If the concern there, I think, is anytime a utility needs money, they could simply just say, look, we have to do upgrades because there's safety concern. And they're able to tell the stockholders, this is a great way for us to raise the rates. How do we explain that to the ratepayer?
Vice President Fielder, Commissioner Pinochi, when MDU replaces mains and service lines, that is a capital improvement, and that money, or not, I shouldn't say that money, but that cost gets placed into rate base, which then MDU will seek to recover a return on and a return of its investment. So that's the return on equity, and the return of, which is the depreciation. And so with your language of requesting money, we don't really grant them money to do these capital improvements with pre-approved money. They're essentially determining which mains and services need to be replaced, and then with those capital improvements, that money then, or that those capital costs get put into rate base. Commissioner Pinochi.
Any other questions from commissioners? On this line of questioning, Grant, Mr. Fink, you had given us a rundown of the pipeline replacement, safety and integrity projects that the utility has identified and that staff has confirmed were put into service through the discovery process. And you mentioned, you listed off 33 miles in Glendive, new pipeline, 2 miles in Hinsdale. And you also stated that there was a project in Miles City that started in 2022 and was scheduled for completion in 2026. Can you tell us how many miles of pipeline are included in this rate application of that project?
Vice President Fielder, I don't have the exact mileage for the Miles City project. However, I do have the magnitude of the projects that Montana Dakota was involved in since the last rate case, which there was approximately 50 miles of pipe that was replaced, according to their testimony.
All right, so that leaves about 15 miles for Miles City, if I do my math correctly, with 33 being in Glendive and 2 being in Hinsdale, 50 miles total. We're looking at about 15 miles of the Miles City project. Mr. Neerstead, does that sound correct to you?
That's correct. Yeah, the figure that MDU gave was 13.9 miles for Miles City, but yeah.
Thank you. All right, any other questions for commissioners to ask of staff before we go into a motion and debate on the motion? Seeing none, do I hear a motion? Commissioner Bukacek?
I make a motion to approve the proposed interim order and authorize staff to make any non-substantive changes as necessary.
Is there a second to the motion? I will second the motion. Commissioner Bukacek, you may open on your motion.
Thank you. My colleagues know that in my opinion, the time to make a decision on this interim case is well past due. My prepared comments I will give you, I state earnestly for your consideration, and also with the hope of helping the public to better understand our processes. There is a precedent in case law pertaining to interim cases, and I emphasize interim cases I have one of them printed here, stating that the neglect, failure, or refusal of the Montana Public Service Commission to act on a petitioner's application for an interim increase in rates for natural gas service constitutes an arbitrary action on the part of the commission. To delay this interim case further thereby puts us at risk for a lawsuit. For the purpose of discussion today, my reasons for supporting my own motion, I have narrowed to 3, and I've made it as short as I possibly can. So number 1, for the sake of customer protection and keeping the lights and heat on, maintaining utility financial help is obviously critical. We all know that. The utilities requirement in our compact is to provide safe and reliable service to all customers at a reasonable price. We know that. The Public Service Commissioner's end of the compact is balancing customer protections with utilities' fair opportunity and legal right to recover its costs and earn a reasonable return on their required investments. There are reasons why these are not free market principles that we apply, and that's a whole nother topic, obviously. And because it is forward-looking and based on models, the impact of a utility's ability to attract capital investors is difficult to measure with a truly objective yardstick. Notwithstanding that difficulty, the neglect or understating of that portion is an oversight that could have grave consequences if a regulatory agency appears adversarial in their decisions. If the PSC does not meet their responsibilities, the utility will be less likely to be able to meet theirs. Interveners had the required opportunity to give input. Based on the evidentiary record, existing natural gas rates do not allow MDU to fully recover the cost of providing natural gas to its customers. That places the rate payers at risk for inadequate receipt of MDU's life-sustaining services. My number 2 reason for supporting my motion, we at the commission, all of us are very concerned about the broad issue of inflation, the high cost of living that is making just about everyone's life more difficult and is placing some people in dire straits. We get that. Our concern notwithstanding, as an agency tasked with balancing the needs of the utility companies and their ratepayers, the commission must take into consideration the impact of inflation on the utility companies as well as the ratepayers. Utility companies cannot reasonably be blamed for the high cost of ratepayers' food and shelter. MDU employees are also facing higher prices on everything in their individual lives. And based on the current evidentiary record, as our staff stated, MDU operations face a significant increased cost of doing business. The requested MDU rate case of $5.11 per month is much less than the increased ratepayers have seen in the cost of food, rent, and property taxes. And as we have discussed, through scrutiny and application of principles, our staff brought the rate increase down to $5.01 a month. My 3rd reason that I support my motion, through close scrutiny of current and forthcoming information, the claims MDU is making about their costs and their risks will be further delineated in the full rate case in the future, as will the prudency of their investments. If in the final MDU rate case, as had been discussed, the approved final rates are lower than the interim rates proposed at this time, the interim rates will be refunded with interest to the ratepayers. That is an incentive for utility companies to be forthright in their estimates and other statements and provides a significant element of protection for the ratepayer. I urge you to approve staff's well-reasoned and researched recommendation. Let's keep the lights on. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bukacek. Other comments from other commissioners? President Molnar.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I'm going to jump in here. I did not wake up this morning hoping I could vote for a rate increase. There's not a commissioner here that wants to do that. We are bound by law. We are bound by precedent. In this case, if you take the $5 per month increase and look at it as what is it over the last 4 years, it's $1.25 a year. And now we're catching up. It's kind of like having a construction contract based on cost plus. You do the work, you turn in your receipts, they look back, they okay them, and then you go forward. This is 4 years worth of cost plus. During that time, if you take the 10% increase, 9% increase, divide it out by 4, it's less than the cost of inflation. We do not do rate base on cost of inflation. We go with cost of service. I am served by MDU in my home in Laurel. I heat my home with gas, not electricity. I heat my water with gas. I don't want to pay a rate increase. I understand every public commenter here. One of the things I think that need to be made clear is that I buy my natural gas from Montana Dakota utilities. The amount of investments that we're talking about are Montana Dakota utilities resources. That includes Knife River. There is not a court in the land that would tell us that the Knife River gravel pits have to subsidize Montana ratepayers. We'd lose that in about 1 second. A couple of years ago, the legislature passed a bill that violated the contracts clause, went to federal court. The Attorney General walked in and said, I don't have any defense for this. Cost $900,000 to the opposing attorneys. We don't want that here. So with that in mind, I would point out that the Montana Consumer Council is constitutionally mandated to represent ratepayers here, and they have not filed a case, a complaint, a statement that any of this is not prudent. If we go to court, I don't know what it would stand on. I do know that this will go on. It may go up or down a little bit. The rate of inflation tells me it'll go up somewhat. Exactly what that will be, I don't know. But now, for now, to make sure that ratepayers don't have to pay interest on a takings clause, which in the U.S. Constitution is the First Amendment. And we have that in the Montana Constitution. Until we have a defense against this that is viable, we're going to have to live within the law. So with that in mind, the case goes on. This is an interim. The people that commented, I would ask that they stay engaged, that they send in their questions. We will review the questions and they will get answers. And for now, that's the best I can do.
Thank you, President Molnar. Other comments from commissioners?
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Pinocci.
So I think one of the public commenters, tough question was if stock was able to produce 50 cents per share in the last return, I don't think there's any difficulty to attract investors. But the concern that the ratepayer has, if profits are high, should they be lowering the rates? And if profits to the company are high, why would we approve a rate increase? And this is a tough question to answer as we're faced with giving them a rate increase. At some point, the Public Service Commission has a responsibility to say, look, if you're making really good profits, there should be the possibility of lowering the rates. If their profits are very low, then an argument's made that we should increase the rates. And if profits are fair, then the argument can be made rates should stay the same. Does anyone have any comment on how to answer these questions to the public?
President Molnar.
Thank you, Commissioner Pinocci. I alluded to that. Perhaps I didn't drill deep enough. The profits, et cetera, that people are talking about are on MDU resources, not MDU utilities. So you can't buy shares in Montana Dakota Utilities. You buy it Montana Dakota Utilities Resources. So you're looking at an entity, in this case MDU Utilities, that is about 8%. The other 92% is doing very well. This one is coming in at less than 1% when we authorized a return of closer to 9.5%. It is by federal guidelines. You can't defend that. They have to be able to attract investment. That investment means they have money to use without borrowing. If they have to borrow, then the consumer has to pay the interest. So it's not a matter of how is MDU doing, it's Montana Dakota Utility Resources is where these quotes are coming from, which owns, I believe, the most gravel pits in the nation. They're clear down into Florida. Those are doing very well. This is not. We have an obligation to allow them to make a reasonable rate of return. We've already established that. If we're going to change that, it'll be at the end. And even that will have to be justifiable or we go to court. If it's not justifiable, we lose and the consumer pays all those costs.
Thank you, President Molnar, for the clarification that the utility we're dealing with is a subsidiary and just one small part of the overall company known as MDU Resources, whose profits were called into question earlier this morning during comments. Mr. Templeton, do you have a correction or a clarification?
Just one clarification regarding the 0.18% return on equity. Part of the purpose of an interim rate increase is to provide the company with some cash flow so that it continue to make improvements as necessary and maintain the existing property. That's all.
Thank you. Commissioner Wellborn.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I would like to just take a second to thank staff for not only the work that has gone into this by and large before my time on the commission, but also the white paper that came out and the notes that are before us today made it much more easier for someone like myself to try to understand. So I certainly appreciate that. I also appreciate the fact that they went and rolled up their sleeves and dug into, you know, maybe the percentage that was being asked for originally wasn't justified, but you know, this adjusted amount is, and I guess what it comes down to for me is it was since my name was brought up earlier in the discussion, you know, honestly, in my business, the supplies that I sell at retail went up over 60% in about an 18-month period. And then, you know, the cost of doing business from, you know, utilities and labor and all of that have all increased over time. And to think that that any business, no business can survive by not passing some of that on to the customer. I mean, either if the market pushes back on you too much when you try to pass those on, you either you go out of business or you have to adjust accordingly. And to say that I haven't been able to pass some of my cost on to customers would be a huge misstatement. So, I mean, we do the best we can, but there's still been increases. My customers are paying more for our services than they were 5 years ago. I mean, plain and simple. And I guess what it boils down to me is doing the math, and I'm glad that the chair kind of brought this up, but by my calculations, a 10% increase is a 10.25 increase, depending on what snapshot of time you go off of. I mean, we're between 4 and 5 years. I mean, just rough math, that's about a 2.5% increase over that time span. I mean, there's not one thing that I purchased that has taken as little as a 2.5% increase over that amount of time per year. And so I will be supporting this motion. Again, I really appreciate the hundreds and thousands of hours of time that goes into fleshing all of this out. But I've got to go with what the staff recommends on this one. I'll be voting yes.
Thank you, Commissioner Wellborn. Any other comments from commissioners? Commissioner Bukacek?
Regarding Commissioner Prochi's extremely important question, I think we've all addressed it, staff addressed it. I think each of us have addressed it to a certain degree, and I think it will be important to be able to explain it to the public in the future, you know, in terms of investors. And I'm just hoping we can come up with a way to maybe do a little better on that so people can understand. Thank you. And I'll send Commissioner Panochi a copy of my number 2 reason why I'm supporting my own motion, because it covers that topic in general.
Thank you. Commissioner Panochi, this being your district, I'd like to call on you in case you have any final remarks on this before the chair closes on it.
I do. Thank you. Question for President Molnar. Tell me about Knife River. Isn't that the gravel company that used to be MDU and is renamed Knife River? And aren't they part of the profit that this goes to? What are your thoughts there? And that's something that I wanted to work with staff some more on. What are your thoughts on that?
Knife River, thank you, Commissioner Panochi. Madam Chair, Knife River is part of the conglomerate that makes up MDU Resources. As such, they are a standalone entity. I have already checked with staff to make sure that Montana Dakota Utility Resources is not taking money from MDU and placing it in other parts of the conglomerate. For them to do so would be highly irregular and in many cases illegal. And there is nothing that indicates that to be the case. So there are many entities underneath MDU Resources, is my understanding. Knife River is but one. They are standalone. We cannot tell MDU Resources to take money from any one of those and subsidize ratepayers. That would be struck down in 1 second. So yes, they are a standalone. They were split off a long time ago, and that's the way it is right now.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. I will just, as a chair, make some final remarks here. And I alluded to this a little bit earlier. I very much like the public commenters we heard earlier today. I was a hard no on this interim rate request by my initial glance at the numbers. And as I dug deeper into this over the last couple of months, since the commission originally did not approve the motion on this interim rate increase, I've looked further into it, and I think we've received more clarification today from our staff. We've received more information from them in the written form. And when I did initially vote no on proceeding with this motion last fall, I did note that MDU has, in my experience here on the commission, been one of the more responsible utilities that we've dealt with. In my opinion, their reputation is good. I know that nobody's perfect, but compared to other utilities that we deal with, I think MDU has been exceptional in terms of their integrity and their operations. And as I looked further at the bulk of these expenditures that are requested in this rate base that are driving the bulk of this, or at least a substantial portion of this adjusted rate increase, the need to implement a safety integrity pipeline replacement based on a methodical program of analyzing where those needs actually are, and not only replacing those pipes with like pipes that are failing, but to upgrade those to ensure higher pressure ratings and higher lifespan and higher integrity, I think is, a responsible move on the part of the company. Yes, it costs more to do that, but I know that the public comments that we would be hearing on this case would be dramatically different had this utility failed to manage the integrity of its pipeline system, and we were here dealing with a catastrophe because of it. So I do applaud the company for taking measures, and our staff for verifying that these costs that are presented to us are for actual expenditures of pipeline put into service that are serving the customers and delivering the energy to their homes that they so much rely upon and need. So That briefly explains why I will be changing my vote from a previous no to a yes in support of Commissioner Bukacek's motion today. With that, without objection, we'll go ahead and take a vote on this question. The question before the commission is to approve the proposed interim order on MDU docket number 2024.05.061 for an interim rate increase. And with that, we will also allow staff to make any non-substantive changes as necessary and note the date changes of the rate effect being February 1st, if this motion should pass. With that, commissioners, let's vote. And we'll take a roll call vote, and we will begin with Commissioner Bukacek.
Aye.
Aye.
President Molnar. Commissioner Wellborn. Commissioner Pinocci.
No.
And I vote aye. So the motion carries 4-1. Thank you, commissioners. And thank you to our staff for your work on this as well. All right, the next matter the commission has before it is work session item number 3. We will move into legislative commission initiated to discuss the bills relevant to the PSC mission, statutory authority, administrative process, and general agency concerns. To discuss PSC budget requests and presentation, to consider staff analysis and recommendations, and provide direction on PSC response to bills, if any. Welcome, Trevor Graff.
Madam Chair, commission members, sorry, I've been saying committee members all week. I thought I'd start by giving you a report of what's happened in the past week. The commission testified as an informational witness on House Bill 55, the Select Committee on Energy Resource Procurement and Acquisitions bill adjusting the IRP process. There are some amendments afoot in that bill that would potentially lengthen the public comment deadlines that were shortened in that bill a bit. The commission's amendment to eliminate the statutory requirement for 2 new positions while leaving the appropriation, seeking flexibility to use that appropriation for consultants in our processes, is in process and will be put forth for consideration as an addition to that bill. Yesterday morning, the commission provided its budget introduction to the House Budget Subcommittee D. It seemed to have received a warm response from that committee, and that committee is very interested in House Bill 103, the Railway Program Expansion Bill. They are actually doing a bit more backgrounding. So when that bill, if that bill shows up in House appropriations, which it would do if it passes later this week in the House, appropriations folks are ready for it and understand the dynamics of that bill. They do have some questions regarding the dynamic nature of the railcar tax revenues in its current form. That's basically the nature of the information they're pulling together and discussing. House Bill 45 was heard yesterday afternoon. The commission testified as a proponent, as it is our telecommunications cleanup bill. That bill was met with no opponents, and I would expect executive action either Friday or maybe early next week. Want to point out some upcoming hearings directly related to the commission. Today in Senate Energy, the commission has 4 bills up. One of those we'll discuss a little bit in our unfinished business from last week. But the other 3 for now are Senate Bill 22, the Class D motor carrier deadline adjustment. Senate Bill 23, the railroad accident reporting thresholds adjustment bill. Senate Bill 51, the telecoms provider registrations bill, And then, of course, Senate Bill 24, which is the blocked crossings bill, which we'll talk a little bit more about shortly. The railway bill is up tomorrow at 3 in-house energy. And then one of the new bills we'll discuss a bit today is up Friday morning. With that, I thought we would talk a bit about your unfinished business from last meeting. The commission asked for a bit more information regarding the potential federal preemption of the railroad blocked crossings penalties bill. Very quickly, just to remind you of that bill, Senate Bill 24 essentially sought to increase the penalties from $25 to $100 up to an inflation adjusted amount that matches current day inflation. That statute was originally enacted in 1907 and hadn't been changed since 1947. By way of further information in that process, commission staff pointed out that we may be federally preempted after we started the process of getting that bill drafted. So the question was raised, what are the current federal penalties? And the answer is complicated. For context, this dates back to the 1970s on the federal front. In the 70s, as some of you might remember, I surely don't, the Carter administration undertook a lengthy process of trying to deregulate the airline industries and the railroad industries. For our purposes, that discussion truly culminated in 1995 with the passage of the Interstate Commerce Commission Termination Act. Congress deregulated the industry and intended to preserve a uniform body of regulations for the railroad industry at the national level in that bill, commonly called ICTA, which is an interesting acronym, I'll admit. In enacting ICTA, Congress granted the Surface Transportation Board exclusive jurisdiction over the regulation of rail transportation, explicitly preempting other remedies provided under federal or state law. In a recent case, Indiana versus Norfolk Southern Railway Company, the court said Congress largely deregulated the railroad industry. It did not invite the states to step in and fill the void. So what we've been left with are several states that do still have laws in force seeking to regulate the time trains occupy a crossing. Most of those bills predate the enactment of ICTA. The most recent examples, and I'll admit this is a brief analysis, but the most recent examples of court cases striking down in specific states attempting to enforce blocked crossing laws in this manner are Oklahoma's regulation in BNSF Railway Company versus Hyatt. That was a 2022 case. And then the most recent example, and the example cited by staff, was the striking down of Ohio's regulation in the state of Ohio versus CSX Transportation. That case played out in the aftermath of the East Palestine incident, and that's a 2024 case. Briefly, that case was appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. In considering Ohio's petition for a writ of certiorari, the Supreme Court invited the U.S. Solicitor General to file a brief on behalf of the United States. And in opposing the state's position, the Solicitor General cited a few principles, one being the cumulative effect of disparate state laws regulating blocked grade crossings could require interstate railroads to substantially modify their operations to comply with a patchwork of varying state and local grade crossing requirements, thereby impeding the flow of interstate commerce. That's pulled directly from the opinion. The FRA has issued several regulations covering, and in this case, this is also from the opinion, that is substantially subsuming the subject matter of blocked grade crossings, that the agency has declined to make the same policy choice, establishing a maximum amount of time that a stopped train may block a grade crossing, perhaps precisely because such a rule would be incompatible with a host of safety and operational regulations that other states have attempted to make in their respective blocked crossing statutes, does not mean that the FRA's existing regulations do not cover the same subject matter as those statutes. And I think it's important to note that in all of these cases, the court has concluded that state laws are preempted. So I give you that, and I do have a short list of points here you can have on paper after this if you would like them. I tell you that because you asked for a better explanation of why the commission is preempted potentially. It does appear that because of ICTA and its broad deregulation of the industry, even if the federal government does not have a specific penalty in place, the commission itself is subsumed by federal law, by the Fed's decision to not do that. So again, the commission's current position on that bill is to go forward with it. There are options on that front if you so choose to do that. There are options if we choose not to. One being to simply pull the bill and come back and fix this at a later date. One being to pull the bill, find a placeholder in order to repeal the bill. And then, of course, your option remains to move forward with the bill and see how it plays out in committee. I would note that since folks have seen the bill scheduled, I've received a few questions in the hallway regarding this specific topic. And I think folks are very interested to see what the commission chooses to do moving forward. So with that, I think I'd stop for questions and seek direction from the commission as to closing up that unfinished business.
Any comments or questions from commissioners on this bill? This is the railroad crossing block fees. President Molnar.
Madam Chairman.
President Molnar first, and then Commissioner Pinochi.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and for your indulgence, Commissioner Pinochi. Mr. Graff, I share your finding that we would be preempted and to pass it. That is problematic in asking legislators to pass something that's illegal, unconstitutional, we can't enforce. Would there be a possibility of making the effective date upon granting of authority by the federal government to where we could work with the Railroad Commission, the Congress, somebody to give the state the authority after all, or not the authority, but congruent authority. After all, the people that are crossing those railroad crossings, et cetera, getting blocked by them are our constituents. And I don't think there's going to be anybody going to federal court because the train took too long. But if train took too long and it was far outside the limits and an ambulance was held up and somebody died, I think the state courts may want to take a look at that. So I think that concurrent jurisdiction would be appropriate, and to put in there that when we are granted authority, that it becomes immediate. We don't have to wait to the next legislative session. Would that be okay or not?
Mr. President, I think the move here may be to simply pull the bill rather than repealing the statute and leave it there in the event that federal law would change and we would not be federally preempted anymore. It would still exist. I think to some extent, that's why some of these states continue to have the laws on the books and simply aren't enforcing them because of the preemption.
I concur.
Commissioner Pinochi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. All right, maybe there's another way to go about this. The problem here is gotten worse because the trains have gotten longer. We're getting up to 10,000 feet because it's more profitable to pull a longer train. I also believe that this is complicating keeping the rail engaged, according to some of my friends that work in the railroad. The answer could be this: if they can't keep a crossing unblocked for a certain amount of time, they're required to put in an underpass. This allows traffic to flow. Now that's expensive, but maybe under states' rights, or say the legislature has the power to say, well, if you can't keep the crossing open, you're responsible to make an underpass. Any thoughts on that?
Commissioner Pinochi, I think initially, without having looked into relevant rules and statutes, my initial reaction is that grade crossing infrastructure is actually under the jurisdiction of the Montana Department of Transportation. But that could certainly be a future conversation surrounding our train regulation authority, our rail regulation authority.
Follow up, Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Commissioner Pinochi.
Montana's growing at a pretty good rate, maybe even a record rate. So the problem is going to persist. I think it's worth mentioning that we can't encourage children to crawl under a train to get to the bus. We certainly have a responsibility for the fire department to respond. They can't be blocked by a train. These problems are real, and they've been reported to me to get some real answers to these questions. We had a complaint that an ambulance couldn't get to a home. So I think that if we bring it up that with Montana's growth, the Department of Transportation may have the argument to say, if you can't keep the crossing clear, that you're responsible, Burlington Northern Railroad is responsible for the cost to the underpass. But when public safety is at risk with medical, fire, and children, okay, trying to get to a bus, I do think we have to make an effort so that I can have some good answers to my constituents. So that's the comment I have for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Wellborn.
Thank you. Excuse me, Madam Chair. Is it appropriate to ask legal staff a question?
If legal staff will yield, yes. Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Lucas. I guess just trying to frame this in my mind in a more practical application. Where case law, it's been brought up that, with case law that there's federal laws that are preempted here. So I guess, what does that do? I know nobody has a crystal ball, but let's just say this bill, as in its current form, became law, and it became, this commission's one of our duties to enforce this law. In that application, or under those circumstances, what does that do for bringing us into litigation? Does that put us in harm's way? The unintended consequence of that, and what does that mean?
Vice President Fielder, Commissioner Wellborn. So the statute exists and it is not currently being enforced. Were any arm of the state of Montana to try to enforce the statute as written, I would expect it would result in litigation. Now, there's a question of choosing your battles that every litigant has to consider before they enter the courtroom. Is it worth it to expend the resources to actually fight over a statute like this? Evidently, based on all the case law that Mr. Graff referred to, the railroad companies have been willing to fight these, and I think that's because of the precedent that could be set by allowing any state to enforce this sort of law were it to remain in effect. So, roundabout way of answering your question directly, I would say yes, there's a litigation risk associated with enforcing the statute as written or as amended.
Thank you.
Are there questions or comments from commissioners? I have a couple comments. Last week when this was presented to us, I was all for moving forward with the bill that we have and imposing higher range of fines on railroads, railway companies which block our crossings. This is definitely a problem in Montana, as Commissioner Pinocci has well articulated. It's a threat. These long durations of trains blocking traffic in our communities present some not only difficulties, but also in some cases some severe harm to life and property of Montana citizens. And so we have a real problem here that must be dealt with. I was in favor of moving the bill forward so that we could flesh out any types of potential opposition to it and maybe legal arguments during the hearings. But now that staff has researched this further, I'm persuaded that what we ought to do is to seek a repealer so that we can actually have the discussion with the legislative committee in a proper context, informing them that that there is an issue and it's a problem that we want to address, but we are not moving forward with the higher fines because we simply are preempted by interstate commerce provisions of the federal constitution and our obligation to it. But I also think that as part of that, we should, as a commission, communicate in an official capacity to the FRA, Federal Railway Administration, and to our congressional delegation at a minimum to state our concerns about this issue and the need to have a remedy similar to what President Molnar was thinking in terms of the state's ability to actually monitor and fine railroads that are blocking our crossings and presenting hazards to the public. But I think we're going to have to figure out a way to get concurrent jurisdiction with the federal government on this matter, or some type of jurisdiction provided to us that we apparently do not have at this point, which is very disappointing to me because it is the health, safety, and welfare of our citizens at stake here. I'm not comfortable with the current statute on the books and leaving it as it lie, because if the legislature passes a law and tells us that this is what we're supposed to do, and they've given us a range of fines to impose on these companies for blocking railroads, and we're not doing it, I think that's problematic as well. And I think our public expects us to enforce the law. And I think the legislature expects us to enforce the laws or carry out the laws that they pass. So to me, where I've arrived at, colleagues, is I think the best solution that comes to mind for me after giving this some thought this past week is to move ahead with trying to repeal the current statute that's on the books, and as part of that, explain to the legislature why we're moving to repeal that, and to also have staff work with the commission on communications to the appropriate federal members, authorities, and congressional delegation, and potentially NARUC or other associations that exist that we need to alert. With that, I'll go ahead and make a motion that we withdraw the bill on railway crossings that the commission put forth, and we seek to find a vehicle to create a repeal of the statute which apparently is obscure and that we can't enforce, and to communicate to the appropriate authorities to try to get this resolved to whatever lawful means are available to us.
I'd like to do a substitute motion.
President Molnar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I would rather give the option to the legislature to either repeal it because it's not enforceable, or to leave it on the books pending approval of federal entities, so that if we talk to our congressional delegation and they get a law passed, or if we talk to the railroad, we say we'd like to have concurrent jurisdiction, we're immediately not 2 years down the road capable of doing it.
Is
I
there,
think,
is there a second to the substitute motion?
I have a question, Madam Chair.
Well, right now it's if you have a question on what the motion is, that would be in order, but we need a second.
That's my question.
Okay. Could you restate your motion, President Molnar?
my motion would be to advise the legislative committee that to leave a dead statute on the books is inappropriate. So we would ask that they entertain a repealer or an effective date of upon concurrent jurisdiction approved by either the Railroad Commission or the or Congress.
Okay. How is that different from my motion?
My motion, or my understanding, your motion is just to do a repealer.
Yes, to use a repealer
So
and to
the-
withdraw our bill. So your motion would be to keep our bill moving forward.
No, my motion is to throw it to the committee to either do a repealer or to give us concurrent jurisdiction upon approval at the federal level.
So to leave our bill moving forward and seek an amendment to it okay. Does that make sense to you, Trevor? Trevor?
Yeah, Madam Chair, if I might, I think the position we're in, the bill we have, the title is too restrictive to do any of this. So we need to withdraw the bill and seek another vehicle for it. We can discuss all of this notion and the motion in that process.
Okay. So is there a second to Commissioner Molnar's substitute motion?
Withdraw.
I'll second.
Never mind.
Okay, Commissioner Pinocci has seconded that motion. And now we find ourselves in a position where I think the motion, well, why don't you go ahead and restate in light of staff's comment, if you would?
Sure. The motion is to address the committee that is going before, that we have a supremacy clause issue. So we ask that either it be repealed so we don't have a dead statute on the books, something we can't enforce, or to give it an effective date concurrent with when should we get federal authority to have concurrent jurisdiction. If we have a big problem with the title, maybe we can discuss that later, but for now, I'd like for this to go forward and we can discuss the title later.
Okay, so that motion has been seconded. And to clarify what I'm hearing, in other words, President Molnar, correct me if I'm wrong, you're seeking to move forward with the existing bill and propose an amendment that would add on an effective date, or basing the effectiveness of the bill on receiving proper concurrence from the federal authorities.
Or This would be up to the committee, so we're not making a decision. Or the committee can simply repeal what we have and they're done.
Okay, Trevor, can you handle that?
Madam Chair, if I might be so bold, I think the motion we're after is one, to withdraw the existing bill draft we have. Two, to seek another bill draft with a legislator in order to do exactly what President Molnar is mentioning. Have that discussion with them as to whether it should be a repealer or concurrent effective date. So the motion would be twofold. One, withdraw Senate Bill 24. Two, seek another bill draft in order to do that.
I'm okay with that.
Okay, any further discussion? I can support that motion. Okay, let's take a vote. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. The substitution motion carries 5-0. Thank you, President Molnar. Thank you, Trevor. Okay, other matters for us, Trevor?
Two more new bills. I'll be very quick. If folks have more in-depth questions about either of these, we can certainly go down that road. The first is House Bill 126. This is an act revising laws related to agency rulemaking. The bill essentially focuses fairly simply on furthering the legislature's initiative to provide notice to bill sponsors that result in rulemaking authority. One part of this bill requires us to encourage active public participation by verbally presenting the proposed action and requesting that the public present any oral or written testimony at the hearing. This is obviously assuming that we elect to have a hearing. It doesn't appear to require us to have a hearing. Some of those written rulemaking processes would still exist to us. It does somewhat vaguely suggest that before closing a hearing on an intended action, the agency shall provide a reasonable time for the public to ask the agency questions. The agency shall respond verbally to the questions raised by the public during the hearing. So essentially what this bill is trying to do is require an agency in a rulemaking process to respond during the hearing to questions raised by the public, rather than just having a process where we would take comment and not have discussion with the public. Providing a reasonable time for the public to ask the agency questions seems a bit subjective to me, but that is part of that ask. It also furthers the requirement to provide notice to the primary sponsor of a bill that results in rulemaking. The agency shall publish the primary sponsor's unredacted comments in regard to the proposal notice and provide a statement explaining why the sponsor's comments were not incorporated in the rule if the agency disagrees with the sponsor of the bill in a rulemaking process. It also allows for the primary sponsor to expressly waive the right to do that. And that is fairly simply all of that bill regarding rulemaking.
Is this one scheduled for a hearing yet, Trevor?
It is up Friday morning.
In what committee?
House Administration, State Administration, I believe.
Okay.
Without questions on that bill, I'd move quickly to Senate Bill 119.
Okay, before you do, I don't have questions on that. I think we should just keep an eye on it. So we're apprised of what's going on, but obviously that's going to go through probably some pretty heavy debate in the committees, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
Without objection, we'll just monitor that one. Okay.
Moving on to Senate Bill 119, I did obviously the language is on ready. I didn't provide it because it's very simple. It repeals the incumbent utility's right of first refusal in building transmission projects. You may remember there was a bill 2 sessions ago to expand that right with the utility, This bill simply takes that provision off the books. It appears to me that this could be a discussion of staying out of the way of new transmission developments where the market has shifted a little bit. We're seeing projects being built by transmission developers who aren't necessarily the utility company. Still a bit unclear, and that one is very new and kind of popped up late last week. It is not yet scheduled for a hearing. However, I would suggest that the commission does not have an actionable decision point in that process per se, and we should monitor it closely and get a sense for what the purpose, what the context for that bill is.
What's the bill number again, please?
Senate Bill 119, and it is a simple repealer of the right of first refusal for transmission construction.
Without objection, the commission will monitor Senate Bill 119. And the earlier bill that I mentioned that we would monitor is HB 126 for the record. Okay.
And that's all I have for today. With the reminder that we're up with 4 bills in Senate Energy today, our bills, well, 3 bills now. And we are up with 1 bill Wednesday that currently have all been slated for proponent testimony from the commission.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Graff from commissioners? Okay, just a reminder that Mr. Graff is very busy with these hearings that he has this week, so let's try to allow him to focus on the work he has at hand this week to the best extent that we can. Thank you, Trevor. With that, commissioners, with no further business being before the commission, I will announce our next commission meeting, which will be at a special time next week in light of Martin Luther King Martin Luther King Day being on Monday, January 20th. The commission offices will be closed. The commission's business meeting will be moved to 1:30 p.m. on Tuesday, January 21st. We will still have our scheduling meeting at 1 p.m. Tuesday, January 21st, but the commission business meeting will be at 1:30 p.m. January 21st. That takes us to the end of our agenda. For the record, the time is 11:27 a.m. and we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.